the teaching that followed was just beautiful, and this is what I'll share with all of you. But the teaching, we know this already, is we are all wounded. There's not a one of us that had totally unconditional love in our childhood. Some of us had loving parents, but we all had conditions. We all had moments of being afraid. We all had moments when we didn't feel nurtured. Some of us, I know from doing so many readings, had very dysfunctional families and were abused and never felt safe and don't know what it feels like to be loved. So what happens is we get out of balance because we only want to feel the good feelings. We learn to sedate bad feelings. In my family, we weren't allowed to be angry. We weren't even allowed to be sick. Ask my sister what my mother used to say all the time. You're not sick, go to school. I think there are other people that have heard that too. So you had to be happy and pleasant all the time. So if we're not allowed to feel negative things, if we don't want to feel sadness, then what do we do with that energy? Where does it go? It becomes stuck or sluggish energy. It's kind of like a pot on a stove with the lid on it. And as emotions boil up, there's nowhere for the steam to go, right? So it comes out in other behaviors, or we just keep pushing it down with addictive behaviors or snapping or getting angry, or very human behaviors that all of us would recognize. But if we're allowed to feel and we know it's safe to feel, that's like letting the steam off. So I came up with a little list, and I put that list out in the email of the result of those kinds of stuffing down. And let me find that list here. Here we go. So some of you might recognize this. Do you find that you constantly need to be doing things? Until a month ago, I was constantly doing. You sit down for 10 minutes and it's like, well, no, I need to go do this or that. I got uncomfortable with just being peaceful and still. Easily restless or bored. Are you addicted to sweets, alcohol, shopping, television? Or do you just turn to those things anytime you need to feel better? As I go through this list, the point is not to make you to feel bad. It's just to raise awareness of how all of us will recognize some of these behaviors because they're so human. I believe it's part of our culture. Are you overweight? Do you over-exercise? Do you experience an undercurrent of dissatisfaction and don't know why? This list is a little longer than the one that was in the email. Do you run from others' charged emotions? Boy, that was me up until a year or so ago. You know, if Ty would just express some of his strongest opinions, I just had to walk away rather than have a debate. Do you snap easily or are very reactive? Do you feel unworthy? I see that in so many people that I talk to or who are my sitters, and knowing who we are, knowing now we are the light, that one is the one, if I could help the world to know how worthy you are, that's what I would choose. Number one, to let people know we can't not be worthy because we are that expression of source. You can't not be loved because you are love and expression. But if you're feeling unworthy, this process I'm going to show with you will help you uncover your worth. Do you have a pattern of being in dysfunctional relationships? I just heard somebody say, oh boy. Do you need attention from others? I mean, really need it. Do you need others' approval? Are you easily affected by others' comments about you? Do you need to be in charge? Do you lie or fib so people will like you? Do you smile when you don't feel like it? Do you ever cry and don't know why? Okay. Do you say yes when you want to say no? Do you do something to impress others? Do you ever manipulate others, no matter how well intentioned? Are you critical or judgmental of others? How about, can you not handle it being quiet? I know some people who keep a television on 24 hours a day. Do you need to have the TV on all the time, or the radio? Can't stand being alone? Must be in a relationship, or become anxious if you can't check emails, texts, or social media regularly. This is a list that came to my mind after the guides showed me how to overcome all these things. This list was just so easy. It just flowed out of my mind, because these are very human characteristics, at least in Western culture. And so if you recognize yourself in there, I'd like you to smile and say, well, that's because I'm human. All right. The one thing I want to stress is there's nothing wrong with you. We are all perfect expressions of spirit. We are all in evolution, and spirit loves the joy of taking awareness of these types of things and transmuting it into something more loving. So that was a bit of a heavy list as I went over it, but the whole point is, when we know those feelings, then when we feel the opposite and we live a more balanced life, it feels so doggone good. And that's what I hope I can help you to achieve this evening, if you identified with any of those. You know, you can raise your hand. I think Bev showed you there's a little button on the bottom. Isn't there, Bev, that says raise hand? It used to be. Huh. Oh yeah, they're raising hands. Raise your hands if you identified with, I would say, at least 25% of the things on that list. Ever been there? You can just click raise hand. Yeah, it's at the bottom of the screen. Look at the numbers flipping through there. Oh. Yeah, so if you're feeling bad or feeling alone, set that aside, all right? Our culture tells us, and there's even a song that says, well, you're only human. But the reason I shared the stories about the other side at the beginning is because, no, you're not. We are human and we have these behaviors. But if you want to rise above those behaviors and find the peace that is always here, the peace that is your birthright, if you want to no longer identify with those behaviors, then we need to identify with yourself as a soul, an eternal soul who came here to have these very human experiences and overcome them and feel joyous from the growth of it, and be able to see the difference that happens when you become aware and awake. What does that mean, to become aware and awake? To become aware, I am the light. I am a spirit. Spirit is guiding me in every moment. And I can change my human behaviors because I choose to, or not. Okay? All right. So I doubt that any of us had perfect parents, right? And so when that nurse said to me, your husband is safe, and the word lighted up, my guides showed me that I did not feel safe as a child. And what happens is, when you in some way are wounded before age 7, that sets up a pattern. And anytime there's a trigger, we revert to childlike behavior. We go back to what we learned as little kids. My mother would look at me the wrong way and I knew I wasn't safe. And it wasn't abusive, but I certainly felt that there were conditions on the love. And I know my mom knows I love her to pieces across the veil, and I loved her when she was here, but she was doing the best she could. All of us are wounded. And when we can see that those who somehow led to us pushing down our emotions were also wounded, that helps us raise our compassion level. So something triggers this steam that's building up in us, or let's call it a charge. A charged emotion is like an electrical charge, and there's nowhere for that energy to go. So something triggers it and we snap, or we we spark like static electricity. We're walking around with charged emotions that we don't allow to be released. And the beautiful thing is we can learn to feel those emotions in a healthy way, and then there's no more charge. We've let off the steam, we've let off the static charge, and they simply flow through us. Now we have energy in motion instead of stuck in us. So I realized that one of my challenges was I never felt safe. I never felt nurtured. So I turned to Ty to help me feel nurtured. And when Ty was in trouble, I needed nurturing from the doctor. And when I was a kid and I didn't feel safe at home, I needed nurturing from the teachers. And that's why I was always so clingy. And that's why I would need a fix, a Ty fix. If I didn't hear from him for a couple hours, I'd get really antsy, but I never knew why. It was because as a child, I didn't get that. Anybody relating to this? I hope this is making sense to you. I'm going to show you a process for how to get past that. So that list that I read to you earlier, we're going to go over that list and show you that it's completely possible to not behave that way, which is incredible. And I'm walking proof of it because it's in just these easy 7 steps, very possible to change. So let me just get straight to the process. Yeah, that's a good thing to do. And then I'll take questions about this later. But our true nature is perfect balance. This is what Wolf came to teach us. If we allow ourselves to feel all of our emotions, if I'm allowed to get angry, it's going to flow through. I can do it appropriately, or with what I know now, I just don't even have to get angry anymore, what I know about who we are. But if I feel sad for some reason, if something happens in my life that causes grief, I can feel that, knowing it'll flow through and knowing that's a healthy response, because we as souls came here to have human experiences. And that the more I feel all of it and let it process and let off the steam without sedating it, without controlling it, without medicating myself with food or drugs or alcohol or TV, then it just naturally balances with other energies, and I feel peace, and so can you. So the process the guides gave me has 7 steps, and I said to them, we need an acronym, like my Bless Me method. 7 steps, the BLESSME, each stands for a step. When they started to give me this, I said, oh my gosh, we have a word, 2 words here. So the 7 steps, and you can take notes, or you'll get this video in 2 to 3 days and you can watch it again and write it down then. The process is called the no fault process, because those are the 7 steps, NOFAULT. And it's the no fault process to achieving wholeness, peace, and to find your way home. Like Wolf said, you find your way home through the heart. What is our true home? It's heaven, and it's right here. I will tell you that I'm going through a tremendous challenge with both of my dogs right now. And I'm having to feel an awful lot of very human reactions. And yet beneath it all is that peace. And I haven't had a single food craving since we got some pretty bad news about both of our dogs. And this is what I want for all of you, to be able to handle any of life's ups and downs without resorting to unhealthy behaviors. So no fault process. When the guides gave me that word, I said, well, that's like a no fault divorce. What does a no fault divorce mean? So I looked it up on my computer. I did a Google search, no fault divorce. And I suddenly turned to Ty and I said, sweetheart, if you happen to go on my computer and see that I've done a search for no fault divorce, it's for the teaching from the guides. It has nothing to do with you. Anyway, but I found out no fault, I'm going to read it for you here. A no fault divorce is one in which there is no requirement to show any wrongdoing. That's really important. So this process for achieving wholeness and balance, being balanced emotionally, physically, and mentally, is no fault means it doesn't matter if anybody's at fault. It doesn't matter if somebody made you angry or you made somebody angry. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. This will work. This is not about placing blame on parents for not doing something right. This is not about fault. So it's no fault. That is really cool, the way this came together. So the lack of judgment of our experience and our behavior, don't judge yourself, is very important for us. This process, this life is about honoring our experiences. That's what we came here to do, to be the expression of source in all the myriad experiences that life offers. I shared this process with a friend, and she was excited and said that she was looking forward to every day being filled with happiness and fun. And I very quickly cautioned her that that's not the way life is. Life is filled with ups and downs and always will be. So we can definitely enjoy the ups. We can experience the downs, yet feel that undercurrent of peace. And believe it or not, no matter what's going on in our life, still know that joy is a natural result of being balanced. Okay? So the process. This requires that you realize there are multiple sides to you, and you get to choose what side you view your experiences through. For most of my life, I thought I was only human. And so this process wouldn't have made sense. Those of you who've tuned in here, you know you're a multidimensional being. You may not have had that experience yet, but hopefully you will. And in that awareness, we can choose to see through our human lens, or see as a soul, or simply let spirit guide us, no matter what level of being that is. So the first step in achieving balance and wholeness, finding peace, finding your way home, is N, and that stands for notice. Most people don't even realize when they're sedating their emotions. Most people automatically turn on the TV, or automatically reach for the cookies or the cakes, or may just snap at somebody and have no idea why. It just bubbles up, and we just do one of those behaviors on the list. So awareness is key to this process, but N is notice any uncomfortable feelings or undesirable situations or behavior in yourself that makes you say, that's not the real me, or I don't like the way I just reacted to that person or to that situation. Just notice that. And this takes, like I said, a commitment to being aware. So that's N. The O is now observe. Observe with interest and curiosity your very human reaction. And the beautiful part about observing is you have to go to a higher level. You may think you're still being a human, but in order to watch your human behavior, you've shifted focus to the observer. And that's very often a neutral position. The more you come to understand the soul, you understand the soul does not judge our human behavior. So the perfect statement to make when you're observing, I know a lot of you know it because Sanaya's taught it so many times, isn't that interesting? So I could have berated myself the other night when I overate the pizza and was miserable because I was trying to comfort myself because I wasn't feeling safe because my husband was in the hospital. But in this case, I would have noticed, oh, look at that. I reverted to overeating and now I'm miserable. Isn't that interesting? Instead of saying, well, you can imagine the many things we say to ourselves when we beat ourselves up for being human. So very important in observation stage here to remain neutral and compassionate. Don't label your behavior as good or bad. Very important. Don't label. and try not to analyze it yet. So that's N-O, now no fault. The next letter is F. That F stands for feel. Feel the emotions that want to bubble up. We're going to start to let off the steam, but it doesn't mean get angry or burst. It just means to allow it to flow. When you watch your emotions, you're really living for once, and they may feel horrible, but because you're allowing them to flow, and that's also the F here, feel and flow, because you're allowing them to flow, they don't get trapped, and they really don't have to stick around too long. I'm going to be honest with all of you. It was just yesterday we found out that Gretchen, my beautiful little black dog, is not going to be with us very long. And I haven't cried yet, and I may or I may not, but I just keep having these moments of grief that well up. And as my friend Irene and I were just discussing earlier, you can really get lost in that, but you can also say, stop. I choose to feel the sadness, but I also choose to focus on the tremendous love she's brought me. And I will always have that in my heart. And that's a choice. But in the meantime, I didn't stuff down that feeling. I haven't had a single food craving since we got the news about Gretchen yesterday. That's a miracle for me. I haven't wanted to run away. That's a miracle. It's because I'm acknowledging this. I'm acknowledging and allowing, and that's the next step. A after F, right? Acknowledge that this emotion, whatever you're going through, and this experience is valid and can result in your soul's growth. Come here, you. Come here. This is Gretchen right here. Anybody that knows Gretchen, when I talk about the Bless Me method, I always say to picture someone or something that you love with all your heart that engenders a feeling of love. And she lets you hold her like a baby, like this. And so you can imagine the feelings that are coming up with her. And yet right now, I've so allowed myself to feel that that it's actually a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. All right, so acknowledge that it's valid. And I've already experienced the soul's growth with this. And this is, I'm just trying to show you what's possible, okay? While you're acknowledging your emotions, you can ask higher consciousness, what triggered this current behavior in me? Why did I snap? Why did I want to overeat? Ask your guides for insight. That's what I did the other night when Ty was in the hospital. Why did I overeat? Why was I acting that way around the doctor? And the insights flow when we're willing to look at it. And now that's A. U is uncover the story. Uncover the story that led to the trigger. All right? You go back to your childhood. And this may be painful. Perhaps some of you might want to work through this with a friend if it's too hard to look at these things. And awareness is so healing because we see, I'm going to put her on the floor now. Okay, sweetie. We see where our behavior comes from. We have understanding, and with understanding comes compassion. Yes, Colleen Smith is a wonderful therapist, and she just wrote a comment, work it through with a therapist. Absolutely. This, I'm not a therapist, but I am telling you with this process, we can become our own therapists. All right, so understand the dynamics leading to your discomfort. And then the L in no fault, this is a good one. Love yourself with no conditions. Some of us don't even know what that feels like. So turn to a pet and they'll show you, right? Love yourself without conditions. Be the ideal parent to your wounded self, which usually is going to go back to before age 7. So I realized there's a little Susie in me who did not feel safe as a little girl, who definitely had conditions on how she was loved. Can you relate to that? So what if you weren't parented right and you don't know what it looks like to be parented well? Then find somebody that models that. That's what Sanaya's message was to us. I think it was yesterday. Find somebody that models unconditional love. And because we're multidimensional beings, we can step into any role that will help us. So this is the most powerful part of this whole process. And this is what transformed me. When I was feeling very alone, and Ty was in the hospital, and I walked around this house thinking, he might very well not come back here. What would that be like in this empty house? How would I handle that? Feeling very unsafe, the guides showed me how to parent ourselves. And literally the way I was holding Gretchen, I imagined myself, and this is what I'd love for you to do, imagine yourself parenting yourself as a little child, comforting yourself, talking to that aspect of you that stopped emotions at that point, didn't allow yourself to feel things because it was so uncomfortable, and say things like, and this is exactly what I said to myself, you are safe. I'm here for you now and always. That is tremendous. How many people feel alone? But as souls, we're never alone. We have a team of guides, and we have our own soul that's connected with our human nature here. And because we get to choose our viewpoint, we can be in soul awareness and in human awareness at the same time, and talk to ourselves from our soul. And I have been assuring myself, I will nurture you. I will never leave you alone. This is the most powerful thing I've ever done for myself, because you no longer have to depend on anyone. You no longer have to turn to anyone. But if this isn't making sense to you, then I'm really going to recommend that you ramp up your meditation practice so that you get to experience pure being and the multidimensional nature of yourself. Other phrases you can say, I love you and I will always love you without any conditions. You can act out, you can be however you want, and I will love you. You can look however you look, and I will always love you. I am here for you. Isn't this what every human always wanted to hear? Always wants to hear, still needs to hear, and yet we can give it to ourselves, and then we're no longer dependent on others. How about saying to yourself, you are fine exactly as you are right now. You don't need to change a thing. If I said that to you face to face, wouldn't you just eat it up? But you as a soul can say that to the wounded child in you that never heard it when you needed to hear it and needs to hear it now. And when it comes from the heart, you can believe it. How about saying to yourself, you are not damaged. You are worthy. I see you. I am here to nurture you. There is no need to fear anything. You know, you are the light. You are a light being. If you set the intention to find healing through self-nurturing, it's not your human that's going to be doing this. You'll come to feel a presence. You won't mind being present anymore. You won't be uncomfortable with being present because truly you will be allowing the light to flow through yourself, and it's transformational. So who is really doing the speaking when you're doing this self-talk? It's presence itself, divine presence, the Holy Spirit speaking through your mind to the human side of you that got a little lost, that went off on a little journey. Incredibly powerful. And so the final step, that's the loving part. T, continue talking. It can be two different things: talking, self-talking, or tap away any high energy that you need to resolve, any really uncomfortable feelings. I've done other sessions on tapping. You can look up EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, tapping. I've done a lot of tapping in the last few days as I uncover charged emotions, and they just dissolve. So create a very nurturing environment for you. And what I really recommend is you do this anytime you notice yourself feeling scared, feeling unsure, feeling unsafe, feeling unworthy, feeling angry, craving something, any of those reactions that you suddenly become aware are habitual for you. And just take a moment and comfort yourself, nurture yourself with this process. Notice you're being